guys, welcome to Healing with Gemstones. This is an introductory course to basic gemstones, basic uses for gemstones, and how to interpret the colors and the wavelengths, and also application. There's all kinds of information out there on gemstones, but there isn't a huge amount on applications and how to use them. Today we're going to go over the introduction to gemstones as far as historical references go. Not a lot of people are aware just how far back gemstones have been used for healing, for emphasis on importance, and for value. We've always placed a huge amount of value on crystals and gemstones, and not a lot of people are aware of how intricately they fit into today's world. So let's go over the history of gemstones. And I want to start out this teaching with a quote from Nikola Tesla. And he quoted long time ago, this was, I think, back in 1940, said that crystals are living beings at the beginning of creation. A lot of crystals and gemstones that you're going to come in contact with have been in creation since 500,000 years, million years. And so when you hold a gemstone like this, you may be holding something that's 1,000,000 years old, that has been in existence for 1,000,000 years. So that's a huge amount of time and energy that is imprinted on that particular gemstone. Tesla also stated, in a crystal, we have pure evidence of the existence of a formative life principle. And although, in spite of everything, we cannot understand the life of crystals, it is still a living being. That's pretty mind-blowing that back then Tesla would refer to crystals as such. Just because we can't conceptualize of this particular entity's life form, it doesn't mean that it's not a life form. Most certainly it is. It holds memory, it holds energy, produces energy. There's so many things about crystals that we just don't know fully yet. But let's take a look back. Let's go back in time now. If you think about it, we've always placed a huge emphasis on gemstones and crystals. Rulers of countries all over the world have placed gemstones in their thrones, in their crowns, and their scepters to create an air of importance or to accentuate the power of their position. And so we have always used gemstones to place an emphasis or importance on things or people. So let's go back in time as far back as we know. There were gemstones buried with people, and they had a significance to them. So they have found beads carved of mammoth ivory, and these were dating back to 60,000 years ago, as well as contemporary beads made from shell or fossils from shark's teeth. These were all placed in graves of humans, and so there was an emphasis or importance placed on those objects to put those in with the burial. Now, the oldest amulets are of Baltic amber, and these date back to 30,000 years ago, and amber beads discovered in Britain as long as 10,000 years ago. So what we're looking at is this right here. This is a piece of amber. It's not Baltic amber. And maybe if I put my paper up there, you can see, yes, you can see it a little bit better. This is not Baltic amber, but it's amber for you to look at. Now, amber we use nowadays, it's the yellow wavelength of light color, and that's associated with creation, happiness, solar energy, uplifting, success, and all around good general feeling. So people recognize that so many thousands of years ago and placed importance on these pieces of amber. Let's look at jet. Jet was also popular in the Victorian age, and jet was used in a lot of mourning jewelry, specifically lockets, pendants, earrings were made of jet. Jet we find it's a petrified wood. It can become electrostatic if you treat it correctly. It has been used for up to 4,000 years, specifically by Tibetan monks to remove negative energy. What more negative energy than to be in mourning or to be in profound grief over the loss of a loved one? And so jet, I think, probably was used to portray the feeling that was coming from the person who was in mourning, but also to soften the negative effects. Now, there have been pieces of malachite found in Sinai as far back as 4,000 years ago BC. Amulets were used by a lot of people in the Christian church, and this I found was very interesting. The beginning of using ecclesiastical rings in the 12th century started by using ruby in the rings, and this is a raw piece of ruby. Let's see if I can get it up here and lift. Oh, okay, you can see that really good right there. That is a piece of raw ruby. It's expensive, and more expensive pieces are darker in color. They're not this light pink. This has a lot of matrix in it, and so you're not going to see a really strong color there. But the early ecclesiastical rings were of ruby, and I think emerald was one of the other ones. Agate was another one that was significantly used specifically in China as far back as the 11th century. And we do find a lot of references to ancient Egyptian jewelries and gemstones. The ancient Egyptians used lapis lazuli, turquoise, carnelian, and emerald, and clear quartz crystal in their jewelry. And so this is a piece of the turquoise. This is a piece of raw turquoise that I have to show you. And this was mined in Arizona. It's a beautiful piece, isn't it? See if I can get a better. There you go. That's a good shot of it. Nice piece of turquoise. The Egyptians also used gemstones to mark the graves that they had with similar gems of the clear quartz and the emerald. They also referred to chrysolite, not chrysocolla, but chrysolite, and it was found that later that was translated into topaz and peridot. Now, I do have a raw piece of peridot to show you. And I believe this one is from Arizona as well. It is a little bit darker. Let's see if I can get it to zoom in and focus. It's having a little trouble. Let's see here. That's a raw piece of peridot. There we go. Now you can see it. And peridot is one of my all-time favorite pieces of jewelry or stones to work with. Green stones, back in historical reference, were usually related to the heart chakra, and the heart of the deceased, and were included in the burials of people who were important to the family. Ancient Greeks also used gemstones very readily, and actually the word crystal comes from the Greek word for ice, because they believed that clear crystal was really water that was frozen so deep and so solidly that it would remain in that solid form. They also used amethyst, and the word amethyst was referred to not drunken. So amethyst was used back in ancient Greece to prevent drunkenness. Not sure how well that worked, but another thing that the ancient Greeks did with the stone hematite, and here's a piece of hematite for you guys to look at. Let's see if I can get it to focus in a little bit better. It's a shiny black type of gemstone. There's a lot of iron in it. And what they did with the hematite is they ground it into a powder, and the warriors of ancient Greece powdered this and rubbed it all over their bodies in preparation for battle, because they felt that this particular gemstone would help make them invulnerable. That's interesting too. Jade was one of the biggest, and still is one of the biggest, gemstones used in China today. It was recognized specifically as a kidney healing stone, but jade is still used today in traditional Chinese medicine massage implements. This is a gua sha massage stone. It's used to strip, and this is used even today as this gua sha massage tool. Now, gua sha, from what I understand, there are several massage tools that you can use for gua sha, and some of the better ones, it's dependent on the resonant energy, the resonance of the particular gemstone. Now, there is a gemstone, it's called Bian, B-I-A-N, Bian stone, and it's supposedly the best resonance for gua sha. The jade is considered very good resonance, but also stainless steel is considered good resonance. Some gemstones that they use along with the gua sha is rose quartz. Rose quartz, the resonance is not quite as good as the jade, but it is considered like one step down. So that was really interesting that I found out about the jade for today's, and the historical use of jade in China. So now this was interesting. The Maori of New Zealand wore jade pendants representing their ancestor spirits, which were passed down. These amulets were passed down through many generations on the male line, and the tradition of green stones being lucky actually still continues today in the Maori population of New Zealand. So that was interesting too. Crystals and gemstones have been a part of practically every society on the planet. There are histories of the origins of birthstones and the breastplate of Aaron, or the high priest's breastplate. The kalpa tree, which represents an offering to the gods in Hinduism, is said to be made entirely of precious gemstones. There are Buddhist texts from the 7th century that describe a diamond throne situated near the tree of knowledge. So gemstones are really representative of things very important, or people that are very important. The ruby was also high revered, and it represented the inextinguishable flame, and was purported to preserve both the physical and the mental health of the wearer. So, people for ages have had the belief and the intuitive knowledge that gemstones impart some kind of benefit to the human auric field. Now, in Europe in the 11th century through the Renaissance, there's a number of medical treatises that extol the virtues of precious and semi-precious stones in the treatment of certain ailments. And you can look those up throughout history. And the gemstones seem to be used alongside of herbal treatments in that part of time. And this was interesting. In 1232, Hubert de Burgh, and he was a Chief Justice of Henry VIII, and we all know who Henry VIII was. He was accused of stealing a gem from the king's treasury, which supposedly would have made the wearer invincible, and he gave it to Llewellyn, the King of Wales, that was Henry's enemy. So they had beliefs back then that these certain items or gemstones imparted these benefits to people. Also, there's a lot of belief that gemstones can be inhabited by jinn or by demons or lesser evil entities. And so it's suggested, if you don't know the background or you don't know where the gemstone came from, that you should always consecrate it when you first get it. And so a lot of people teach consecrating and cleansing your gemstones when you first get the gemstones. Now, because of that concern, I always refer people in Lexington area to Crystal Crazy with Barbara Bacon. She buys or obtains her gemstones and crystals from sources that she knows, and these are private sources that extract the gemstones themselves. And so we know where they come from. We know what type of energy has come into contact with the gemstones. And when I go into the shop, things always have a really good feeling and a really positive source feeling. And you just simply can't replace that. It is so valuable. So the beginning of crystal healing, we do have a story from 1609. Anselmus de Boot was a court physician to Rudolph II of Germany, suggested that any virtue a gemstone has is due to the presence of good or bad angels, and that these good angels would confer a special grace to the gems, but the bad angels would actually tempt people into believing in the stone itself and not the higher source or God. And so there was an emphasis placed on God's gift being bestowed to the energy of the crystal at that point in time. The Zuni tribe wears today and historically turquoise jewelry, although we know nowadays that turquoise is more and more difficult to obtain, and so a lot of the mines have shut down. This again was the piece of turquoise. So a lot of the mines have shut down. So it's kind of difficult to get a really good piece of turquoise nowadays. A lot of it could be other stones that are more readily available that are dyed to look like turquoise. So be sure when you're purchasing turquoise that you make sure it is authentic turquoise. So the Zuni tribe, a lot of their gemstones they use to fashion into fetishes. And fetishes were used as guidepost, inspiration, representation of certain aspects of life. And those were very important in the Zuni culture. Okay, so there's also a tradition, and this is located in Southwest England. Every female, and this is for a specific family, every female descendant wears an antique moonstone necklace for her wedding, which has been in the family for generations. Now, later on, the members of the family did some research and discovered that the moonstone was a fertility symbol. but they didn't realize it until they actually went back and did the research on it. So that was pretty cool, I'm sure, for them to find out. Now let's see. We are moving more towards New Age type of thought, and this kind of blossomed in the 1980s with the advent of New Age culture and the use of crystals and gemstones, and that's pretty much when I found out about them and started loving them and working with them was in the early 80s. And really, they started to become more widely used as a healing method in those days. Now, much of the practice was drawn from old traditions, but mixed with new ones through experimentation and channeling of books like Katrina Raphael and Melody was one of the first books that I ever got for crystal healing. And, back then when we read about, this crystal vibrates to this particular number, I really didn't understand it until I started doing more research into quantum physics and resonant energy. And, the musical resonant qualities of certain things, it all started to kind of make sense in the 90s to me with sacred geometry, resonant energy. We were finding out more and more about this. So today, we have come full circle, and we're now realizing that each particular gemstone has some kind of resonance, or it puts off an energy of its wavelength of light, and also its wavelength of energy. It resonates energy, and that's what we're connecting with. Now, I hope you decide to take the webinar. I'm going to do a Gemstones 101 Healing with Gemstones webinar. It will be posted soon. This is the introductory video for that. And I hope you decide to come with us on Zoom and take the webinar. Thanks for watching. See you later.